Sawadee Kap, I'm JP Mestanza. No technical issues today. Welcome to Phuket Extra, brought to you by pvcphuket.com. A protester is now facing charges over a violent incident in Pattaya with a Russian man who was headbutted during a heated exchange on Sunday evening. Pattaya's Jomtien Beach was the scene of a small rally held by the People's Party of Pattaya in line with the anti-government protesters, when reports say a 52-year-old Russian man walked up near the area with his young daughter. According to the suspect, Naratiwat Kama, they began talking and it got heated. The Russian man allegedly called the protesters trash, and things escalated to the point where Naratiwat is seen on social media footage headbutting the 52-year-old, who was taken to a local hospital. Naratiwat was later charged and detained at Pattaya police station on Monday, released on 10,000 baht bail. Water cannons were used on anti-government protesters on Sunday night to prevent them from continuing their march to the Grand Palace in Bangkok, all the while police look into prosecuting anyone who sent messages to His Majesty the King that violates the law. Let's explain. Protesters gathered at Democracy Monument on Sunday for their march towards Bangkok's Grand Palace to deliver letters about their political grievances addressed to His Majesty King Maha Vajiralongkorn. On their way there, they were met with hundreds of police and several roadblocks. After declaring the march illegal, police used water cannons to disperse the group. There was also a fiery projectile that was clearly thrown by one of the protesters as well. The army chief called that person out in a press conference, although the chief did say that someone who wanted to do harm had embedded with the protesters, not blaming the protesters outright over that. Still, the use of water cannons was back on for the second time after they were used on October 16th during the rally at Patung intersection in Bangkok. Despite the use of water cannons to disperse protesters from reaching the area, protesters set up 4 red post boxes on Ratchadamnern Nai Avenue in order to, quote, send letters to His Majesty the King. Reports say that one police officer and 2 protesters, they'd suffered minor injuries in the whole melee. Now, 2 days removed from that rally, police are going through all those letters and threatening prosecution for anyone whose messages, quote, violated the law. And while he wasn't clear, he's perhaps referring to violations of Section 112 of the Criminal Code, the lèse-majesté law, simply known as 112, which prohibits any criticism of the monarchy and is punishable by up to 15 years in prison. The protests have been ongoing for months now, with protesters repeating their 3 demands for the resignation of the premier, a new constitution, and reforms of the higher institution. Meanwhile, the chief of the Royal Thai Army, Narongpan Jitkaewtay, is announcing that there will be no military coup and that the political differences have to be solved diplomatically through political means. For more, visit thephuketnews.com. Public health officials are trying to locate over 70 people who came into close contact in Phuket and Phi Phi Island with an Indian man who has tested positive for COVID-19. 2 people so far have been found in Patong who were with the man recently, an American and a Thai national, both of whom are now in quarantine, although it's unclear where. Now, officials are trying to track down the rest of the nearly 70 people who they believe to be at risk of contracting the virus after coming into close contact with the Indian man, a 37-year-old who tested positive last Wednesday while taking a health test for a work permit in Krabi, according to reports. He was asymptomatic, but he's now under care at a Krabi hospital. The news comes after reports last Saturday that a 38-year-old man from the Netherlands had tested positive for COVID-19 in Phuket while in quarantine, having landed on the island back on November 1st. No other details about that were available, including how he came to be infected in Phuket. Meanwhile, the Department of Disease Control now has a hypothesis on how a French woman in Koh Samui had tested positive for COVID-19 last month, even after completing her 14-day quarantine. And they say it's all because during her quarantine, the 2 people staying next door to her also tested positive, and officials suspect that she was infected via contaminated food trays placed in front of the rooms. This comes after they examined all the air ventilation systems in the rooms of the hotel in Samut Prakan, which was their designated quarantine venue. For more, visit thephuketnews.com. The COVID-19 administration in Bangkok is now mulling over whether to officially cut down the 14-day quarantine period for new arrivals down to 10 days, but only for 6 countries for now. On Saturday, the Public Health Ministry approved the proposal to shorten the quarantine period from 14 down to 10 days for 6 low-risk countries, including China, Vietnam, Taiwan, South Korea, New Zealand, and Australia. The proposal is now on its way to the COVID-19 task force in Bangkok, who have final say on the matter. A ministry doctor, Dr. Sopon Iamsiritawan, says that as long as the quarantine processes are properly managed, a 10-day quarantine can be just as effective as 14 days in stopping the spread of the virus, saying most people who test positive to the virus after 10 days are mostly asymptomatic and carry a lower chance of spreading the virus to other people. Still, all the processes will be the same, as travelers still have to test negative for COVID before their scheduled flight to Thailand, then several times again upon arriving, while in quarantine. After 10 days, officials still want to monitor these people for about 2 weeks after arriving and keep track of their whereabouts using an app or a tracking wristband, according to the Public Health Ministry. For more, visit thephuket.news.com. 4 new COVID-19 cases in Thailand today, including a 53-year-old Hungarian diplomat who had arrived with a contingent of officials from that country last week. He's the second person in that delegation to test positive, after the Hungarian Foreign and Trade Minister was found infected upon arrival in Bangkok back on November 3rd. The other 3 infected arrivals had come from the US, Sweden, and India, with the total now at 3,844, 95% of patients recovered. The death toll is now at 60 after 1 retired Thai national passed away from the disease last week. We'll be back with Phuket Extra right after this. The Lagoon Saloon Phuket, the LSP, is Phuket Boat Lagoon's newest nighttime venue catering for all private parties. Get in touch via Facebook to discuss. Welcome back to Phuket Extra. Could an electric bus network be developed instead of the planned Phuket Light Rail project? That's what the Transport Minister is now investigating as a way to reduce the cost of the project by 10 billion baht so that the project funds can be approved by the cabinet and the project can be rolled into service by 2023. Citing a recent study of the project, the Transport Minister, Saksayam Chipchub, says that results showed only about 39,000 people a day would use the mass transit system in Phuket, which he argues could be a bus system first and wouldn't require the building of a rail or signaling system, although it would be able to use the central reservation along Tepkasatri Road, where the light rail is planned to be built. It's unclear if their study took into account the number of tourists who would use the system whenever international travel is once again restarted. The sea gypsies on the east side of Phuket town have been given more than 4 rai of state land to live on under a government pilot project to ensure the once seafaring indigenous peoples now have a place to call home. It was all announced at a signing ceremony last Friday between members of several sea gypsy villages around Phuket, Ranong, and Krabi, who gathered at Phuket City Municipality offices along with other signatories, the Chum Chai Foundation, the P-Move organization, the Coastal Resources Department, and the Environment Ministry. 3 pilot areas have been designated for development. In Phuket, the sea gypsies living in Phuket town will be granted a 4 rai upon which to live, while the other 2 communities have been granted 4 rai and 7 rai respectively in Ranong and Krabi. The agreement will also see government funds provided for public utilities to be installed. For more, visit thephuket.news.com. 3 boat crewmen are still recovering at Vashida Phuket Hospital after being injured in an explosion and fire that took place in the middle of Phang Nga Bay as they were checking the readiness of their tourist speedboat. The incident took place shortly after 8:20 a.m. on Sunday on the speedboat Fiona, which caught ablaze near Tap Lamu Pier. One of the crewmen told Navy officers that while he was starting the boat to check its readiness for taking tourists to the Similan National Park, there were sparks coming from the boat engine leading to an explosion. And while there were no tourists on board the boat at the time, 5 crew were hurt, 3 seriously, before Navy assistance arrived to take them to the hospital and prevent the fire from spreading to other boats. New rules on hairstyle and dress code for students in Thailand as the Education Ministry amended its regulations following an outcry by students who say the previous rules were an infringement on their human rights. Earlier this year, acts of protest by students demanding that some of the regulations on school dress and hair be relaxed. It took place around the country. These new regulations do a few things. Mainly, they now say that the rules on hairstyles and gender are gender neutral, as long and short hair will be permitted for all students, although facial hair and hair dyeing are still prohibited. The new rules also allow schools, students, and parents to come up with their own guidelines for their respective school, while also prohibiting teachers from hitting students as a punishment for not following the rules. Parts of Patong and Karon will be without mains water supply throughout each day for a week nearly as the Provincial Waterworks Authority make repairs on the mains pipe connected to the reverse osmosis plant north of Karon Beach. The mains water supply will be shut off from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. or thereabouts while work is carried out, with water supply in unspecified areas in Patong and Karon especially affected, with water pressure falling to low levels or no water at all. Again, this affects certain areas of Patong and Karon every day until November 17th. For more, visit thephuket.news.com. And that's it for Phuket Extra today, brought to you by pvcphuket.com. For safe, secure, and soundproof windows, visit pvcphuket.com. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back tomorrow, 100%. Until then, stay classy, Phuket.
Phuket's rapid modernization has made it one of the world's premier holiday destinations. Investors can still buy quality condominiums for as low as $75,000 and luxury properties can go all the way up to 20 million. Condominiums in Phuket are a safe, secure bricks-and-mortar investment offering foreigners freehold ownership. Call or email Thai Residential, Phuket's #1 trusted real estate advisor, to find your perfect Phuket property.